What's up, guys? We're back with another Build Beauties today, and of course, I have a lovely guest with me. Say hello.
Hey everybody, it's Anthony Tardino. Thanks Frank for having me on.
Absolutely. And Anthony, you were playing Blue Resolute Ginyu down at South Kai. I think it's been about a week now since. Did you dodge the COVID scare?
I did get sick earlier in the week, but I actually went and got a PCR test, I think is what it's
Uh,
called, where they swab your nose, and it came back this morning. I am negative, so
oh, right on.
I got sick, but I dodged the COVID, so
Per
that's good.
Perfect.
I didn't have it for the third time anyway, so.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, anyway, we're here to talk about Anthony's Blue Resolute deck. Anthony, you top forward, I believe, or did you top eight?
Top eight. Yeah, I lost to Joey, the creator of the game, with the most busted deck in the game. In top eight. So that definitely was a bitter bullet to take, considering I've complained about Aura Goku constantly. I hate playing against that deck, and every tournament this season I keep traveling to these and just end up running into it at really important moments
Mm.
where it ends up really screwing me over. So, but overall, really happy with the performance of this deck. I felt like I played the right deck. Joey really only won because of a mishap with Ocular Pat Down being the last, both of them being within the last three cards in my deck.
Ugh.
If they were shuffled any differently, I probably would have won. So it's it is what it is. I feel happy with my performance.
Right on. Well, to get into the deck here, of course, we talked a little bit before this video. You're talking about you were testing out Resolute Vegito, wasn't liking it, and you chose on Ginyu with Resolute. So why do you feel like Ginyu is a good pick with Resolute Mastery here?
I mean, I think considering Blue Ginyu was like one of the really powerful decks in the beginning of the game, I personally didn't play until like set six. I always bought the cards, but I nobody actually taught me how to play until I went to the card shop one time and somebody was like, "Dude, you're in here all the time, like getting these cards." And I was like, "Yeah, I just think they look cool." And he's like, "Just bring your cards in, and I'll teach you how to play." So I don't really have the experience. And actually, Blue Cooler was my first deck, Protective Cooler. Um, but yeah, Resolute's like my favorite mastery, and I was messing around with Resolute Vegito because you get that hard plus one every turn, but it's like a raw card draw, and that can be really really iffy. And then also he's like extremely susceptible to stage lock in blue because there's like no stage gain cards.
Hmm.
And I was running everything. I was running like all the combat enders. I was running on the moves. I was running a couple allies like Krillin. You can put him into play. Krillin to the rescue ally. You can put him into play
Yep, to gain the five
to
draw.
gain 5 stages. You don't get the -2 mod because you. But I always forget, and it was Shane who pointed this out. You can play him with Vegito and draw a card, gain 5 stages. You just don't get the mod.
Mm.
So I was like playing everything to gain stages, couple allies, and I could not get it to work. So I was like, okay, Resolute's my favorite. Who's the best? Blue Ginyu, classic, staple. So I started messing around with this deck. I built it like a couple days before that online tournament we played just a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
And I think I top four, top eight that. I can't remember what top cut was, but I only made it to the first round of top cut. And then went to Shane and I was like, "Hey, look at this list. What do you think?" And he's like, "You're missing defense." So I cut Unleashed and opted for Captain Ginyu's body change to uh, get some more defensive cards in here. So I think before I wasn't running Deterrence. I wasn't running Blue Energy Resistance. So there was a couple changes that I made. I was also running Warp Blast,
Mm.
and I
Yeah.
was like that card was like doing okay, but then it hit me like, dude, I could just run Ocular Pat Down and top deck it with Blue Blanketing Blast when I need to against certain decks. So, or to my surprise, I really don't like this card too much. It is very like, why would you ever want your opponent to banish 7 cards from your discard pile? But using it in combat is actually really strong, having that hand knowledge. It's basically blue mental drill for the turn.
Yeah.
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 Yes. Um, if you're a blue player, having that hand knowledge and knowing not when to not overextend is one of like the main things you can do in blue. There's nothing worse than seeing like, oh wow, I've played all my cards, I have no more options, or like I only have one card in hand, and your opponent has like three cards in hand. Like in my opinion, blue is like one of the worst styles for that. It's not like orange, where like that one card could be the one card that just absolutely shuts down combat
Flips,
for your.
flips, flips stuff over. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's Ginyu is just super consistent. He tutors an ally. He gains an anger when entering combat. So like you've got this safety net, especially with Goldo being that ally, and he can use his power immediately. He's just, in my opinion, the clear best Resolute deck right now. I think Hirabu is definitely like a close. I know Henry did really well at South Kai with that deck as well. I think that deck's probably like marginally, like very close to this deck, because he does a lot of the same stuff where he can tutor an ally early and have that defensiveness. He can gain enough anger to maybe slime to 2 and then unleash to 3 and really get ahead of his opponent the same way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, moving on into the list here. Of course, you said that you had Unleashed at one point, but of course, Ginyu's body switch. I feel like is always live on one. Even two, a lot of MPs are just high power level. I think the only time it's really going to be dead for you is maybe like three.
Yep. Yeah, and honestly, once you get to 3, you're fine.
Yeah.
Everything's coming in for +5 most likely.
Yeah,
So
with Goldo out
uh,
there. Yeah.
stop with Goldo. You can get the +6, +3 with Shizami. You've typically won if you're throwing attacks for that much damage. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's just something cathartic about like, you and your opponent have been even all game, and you've been like making the best plays you can, and then you get to 3, you block with Goldo, and now you're like, behold,
Yeah.
damage.
Everything's big all of a sudden.
Yeah, yeah,
And of course, you did opt to run the. I guess to go back to things, you did opt to run the set 1 2, which I think a lot of people do, just because a combat or two of this level 2, and you're on 3
yeah.
if they don't answer the anger.
You're blue style, so your allies aren't like gone forever if they get banished. You've got reflexes and blue clash, so there's a lot of ways to get your allies back into play pretty easily. So typically, if if you get to level 2, you can keep your allies in play and get to level 3 pretty consistently. So that's, I think a lot of people in the tournament were surprised, just not by their reactions, but like their actual. They didn't hold the right cards to keep me from leveling by anger
Yeah.
throughout the. Oh, there was a lot of times where I'm getting to 3 without Ginyu's body switch. So that was kind of cool to see, like, oh wow, I'm a blue deck. I can actually level up. This is great.
Yeah.
And if you opt for Jace on level 1, you're getting 2 guaranteed anger basically. So there's a lot of just raw power in this deck. Other decks, they tutor drills when entering combat. This deck tutors a 6 life card energy attack that raises your anger 1. That's really strong.
Yeah.
So, mm-hmm.
Uh, moving on to the other events, of course, you got the 3 stare down and 2 sphere. I think that's like a pretty standard loadout for a lot of people. You don't have a ton of events in the deck, but sphere is never bad. Unleashed meta. Um, and stare down, so makes sense. Of course, the 1 OPA, yeah, your ally deck. 3 clash, of course, especially with Resolute. Crit attack, why
Yep.
wouldn't you run it? Uh, the 3 blue arrest, yeah, I mean, it's an ally tutor. You did run the ocular pat down, and I suppose this is a big one. We talked about it a little bit, but how did you overall feel about the card in the deck?
Typically I wouldn't opt for this card. I, I don't remember if I said it outside the video, like before or during, but typically do not like this card.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, but the it it really does work quite well. Um, there was a game I played against Eric Johnson in the tournament. I think this was round 4 of Swiss. And he's rampaging Vegeta. He has a really solid list. I think every card in his deck says raise anger 1, and then he hits and raises. It's a really hard deck to control. And Ocular Pat Down, I put both of them into play. And I used the first one on a combat where he was on level 2, was able to keep him at 0 anger level 2 because I was able to check his hand for blocks and sequence my hand perfectly to make sure he was never able to get within that 2 anger threshold to like phase strike or something like that to go to level 3. And then also banishing attacks from his discard pile is going to make it harder for him to toolbox his discard pile later. So this card was very powerful in that type of matchup. Also against Kelly, I don't remember if this popped out or not, but he was playing Rampaging Draku, and I was very much thinking like, okay, I kind of hope I see Ocular Pat Down so I can set up the bottom of his discard to be a dead draw. Because
Yeah.
he Rampaging Draku, if he can go to 2 or 3, that could be a problem if the bottom card is something I can't interact with. So I'm looking at this card more seriously now, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe people haven't actually been playing this. Now, I know, and this is not my idea, by the way. I feel like I have to trademark Shane Rennell's here because he's the one who is like, this card is working so well for me in testing, and I was like, oh hell no, I'll never run that. And here I am, like singing its praises. It's a very good card in this meta. I really do believe because it is. I mean, at worst, it's 3 endurance, and what deck? When decks are so easily slinging like 10, 11, 12 life card attacks, what deck could not use 6 more endurance? Let's be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very true.
So, yeah. Blocks are really powerful. Don't walk into them. Run Ocular Pat Down.
That's fair. Especially in it's an unleashed meta at worst, so this card is very live these days, and a lot of the anger decks do play with pile, um, as you've been mentioning. So, and Vegeta's a big part of the meta. Killing his pile is
Yep.
very, very good. So, of course, we get into the allies. I think it's pretty standard. You don't run Birder, but Shisami is kind of like Birder.
Yeah.
You could run them both, and I guess if you wanted to. Zarbon, of course, is a super silly ally. Zarbon, you talk to any Ginyu player I've talked to, Zarbon, they say pretty much makes like physical beats like unwinnable against Ginyu. Zarbon Gildo combination.
Yeah. Honestly, I left that tournament and I played against the majority of the matches I played against were physical beats. I played against Rampaging Dragu first round, and he's like mixed beats, but he does throw some stage beats heaters, like he's running dive and shit like that to drop for like big damage, unpreventable. And then second round was against Relentless Hercule, which is like that match. I think would have gone a lot different for me if I hadn't played against Hercule a lot. Kelly and Shane both play Hercule a lot, so I've got the experience. I knew what to do. And then round 3, I don't remember. Oh, that was Brandon Biggers. That was life card beats. And then round 4 was Rampaging Vegeta. So like there's 3 physical beats decks right there. So, and Zarbon did not come out in any of those games. So it did not matter. I'm actually like, he could probably get cut for like the 3rd sphere or something. I don't know, but there are certain games where you drop Zarbon in play and the game just stops for something like if somebody had played Imposing Gohan or something like that at the tournament, that's the kind of deck where you drop this and your opponent is the game stops for them. And it's even worse when you have Goldo and Zarbon in play. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do?
Yeah, as a stage beats or physical beats deck, you gotta like sit around and wait for the board hate. Only way you can do anything.
Yeah. So, yeah, he didn't come into play in this tournament. I think the meta was right for him though. Like tons of Vegeta in the tournament. It and ended up not mattering, which is kind of insane in a
Yeah.
blue Resolute deck. Because that's typically your hardest matchups are the ones that throw a lot of stage attacks that can break through your mastery with like dig or something like that. Like those are your hardest matchups in my opinion. So uh, the fact that he didn't come into play is kind of wild, but I think that just speaks to the strength of the deck. Nappa is actually just he's the best ally in the game in my opinion. It is so crazy shutting off. One of your hardest matchups, Vegeta, Prideful Challenge is a huge problem. You can't use your allies. Uh, Nappa says no to that. Red Relaxation, turning that off. If you go up against Red Ball, if you can get Nappa in play and just hold on to an energy block to block the static shot, you're probably safe. Like you're probably going to win that game. If they get the lucky red energy blast, so be it. But
Yeah.
and the other thing about this deck is it has 62 endurance. So like you can take 7, 8 life card attacks trying to like bait Ocular Pat down to pop out, and you're likely not going to get crit. You have a there were times against when I was playing against Joey where this never actually happened, but I had blocks in my hand. I have Galdo in play, and I'm taking an 8 life card attack on purpose because I want to try to sweep his board so I can deal damage. It didn't crit, but I also didn't see Ocular Pat down until the last 3 cards of my deck.
R.I.P. R.I.P.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is a deck that you can enter combat and like really trust to do the thing that it's supposed to do, and you're not just gonna like get totally uh, like countered, or it's like impossible for your opponent to answer all these moving parts.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's
like,
sounds a lot like how Ascension Ginyu was when I had that described to me. So
mm-hmm. Just a lot going on. I mean, this is like essentially blue good stuff deck. I feel like I don't have to explain every card choice.
yeah. Uh, you did mention like the blue blanketed blast combination with ocular pat down. I mean that's always great. That's always something. If they for some reason end up in your discard pile from like a pass or an enter on you and you drop in your pile or something, that's a cool combination. Of course, blue blanketed blast top decking anything you want. It's pretty good. Into a
Yeah,
draw. Head knock, yeah. Betrayal, yeah. Teamwork, of course. I mean, this card is I look at this card and I go, the fact that it is like worded where as long as you just have an ally, you get it for the remain is just wild. This card is fucking silly to me. Like this is such a good card.
yeah. It's one of the few cards though where if you have 2 of them in your hand, you do not feel good because you're not going to get the W's on both of them.
No.
It's like but it being a 2 anger, it can come in for really big damage if you level to 3 with it. It's really dumb, but especially if you're in like a really long combat where you've static blasted and you've discarded for energy wave, and then you have teamwork at the end. Like you can easily output like 50 cards of damage in a combat with this deck. It's very consistent at pushing those like really heavy-handed, the game is over for you kind of combats.
Yeah, yeah. So like that's the thing is, you don't have dig, but you have static blast, which is essentially dig. You have that unpreventable ability. Plus, like you said, you have the potential if you're on 3, even before 3, you still have the Goldo +2/+2 coming in probably, maybe a Shisami and the Mastery, so you're doing a +3 or sorry +4 life +3 stages very easily. Uh, just the modifiers build up very quickly, and you get to start the game with up to 2 on the board with Goldo.
Yeah.
So
I was actually surprised how many times in the tournament I opted not to go for Goldo. There was a couple combats where I felt I was entering, and I feel like my opponent wants me to get Goldo right now,
mhm.
so I'm gonna get Raccoon, and it paid off for me like every game. Uh, the main one that happened was against Andrew Bornstead. I won the roll. I discard OPA, rejuvenated card. I forget what it was, and then it goes to him. and then he passes to me, and I draw like this ridiculous bonkers hand, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go get Goldo. I'm looking at that OPA, and I'm like, there's no way he's holding a physical block against me. Like, he's gonna have to hard draw this. So I go and get Raccoon. I draw OPA. I OPA for Goldo. Like, there's nothing you can do. I ended up doing like 45 cards of damage that combat. It was
Yep.
crazy.
Yep.
Like, yeah, there's just so many moving parts and just like a lot of things your opponent has to answer. You know, especially if you enter with Raccoon and you throw his power immediately, if they're holding ally kill, like you've already used it.
Yeah.
So I don't care anymore.
Yeah. Raccoon doesn't matter anymore at this point. You know.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to point out about this deck is Resolute, like it always, blue in general, you kind of struggle with discard hate, like you don't have any. This deck is really good at banishing cards from your opponent's discard pile. Blanketing Blast, Ocular Pat Down, and level 3 and 4 all banish cards from your opponent's discard pile. So that's like a weakness in blue that's been shored up by this Mastery MP, or well, just MP combination with this style.
Yeah.
Ocular Pat Down and 1 blue Blanketing Blast hitting is 10 cards banished from your opponent's discard pile. That's pretty strong.
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, that's definitely something good to point out. I think pile hate is really underrated in general, but a lot of stuff doesn't necessarily pack it naturally.
Yeah, like you don't want to run Death Blow in a deck like this.
No.
In my opinion, it's not something that you can pitch to Mastery. It's not gonna be doing the type of damage that you want it to do during stages. I mean, it'll come in for life cards because your Mastery and your other mods, but yeah, I was surprised. Pretty much every time is a Warrior's Tool hit the discard pile, I was immediately able to banish it with one of my effects. I had Blue Blanking Blast, I had an Ocular Pat Down in play, I was on level 3, something to get, because this deck, it just stops if your opponent times you. There's not a whole lot that you can do. Your ally tutors are mostly hit effects. Your anger lowering is like something, but most of your attacks don't lower anger until they hit.
Yeah.
Blue Energy Wave, Blue Static Blast, Blue Teamwork, all lower anger, but only if they hit. So like time really just like stops you dead in your tracks. So as soon as you see that hit the discard pile, use one of your effects to banish it.
Yeah.
But and this is one of the few Resolute decks that actually has the effects to do that.
For sure. Moving on to the final bits of attacks here, and a couple things. So we mentioned Static Blast. This, of course, is unpreventable. Some nice anger swing. Energy Wave. I love this card. I previewed this card. I love it. This card makes me want to play Resolute all the time. So unpreventable attacks, never bad. Pitch to Master, an extra card, always good. But the Energy Push. Why did you opt for Energy Push? I see a couple combos in here, but I'm curious if you bring them up.
Yeah, so I think the first one is obvious, is when you're on level 2, you energy push the ally that you want to tutor out of your deck. And then you immediately go get him with your level 2. Because you can get any ally with Ginyu 2. It doesn't have to be an alien trait. So if you're going against like that red deck or something, you can energy push, name Nappa, go get him, put him in your discard pile. It's also, blue doesn't have a lot of options for time. Like I got the 3 stare down 2 sphere, but time is, like I said, you just stop when your opponent plays time. So I'm almost always naming energy push with
time with Energy Push.
Yeah, and it's such a good card to, like, if you have a lot of matchup knowledge, you could play energy push at the beginning of combat and check your opponent's deck and like, okay, they have X, Y, and Z in their hand.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just anything you can do to get a little bit more knowledge of what your opponent might be hiding here is really good. So you don't overextend, because that has happened so many times with me in these blue decks. I really like it. It's a solid two endurance card. It raises your anger, so like you can get those big anger combats where your opponent's like, wait, what the fuck? Did he just level twice by anger in a blue deck?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the card's just really good. It's a great toolbox card. And at worst, you're naming, like if you're going against energy beats, you're naming blue leverage and blue deterrence and getting that stuff out of your deck, so you're not going to draw it when you discard blue
Yeah.
guard.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was also going to say it does have ocular pat down, smack that out of your deck, and top deck with blanketed potential
Yeah.
as well. So,
Yeah.
of course, I just had to think of that. I'd bring that one up as
Yeah.
well.
That also, if I had seen Energy Push, Blanketing Blast, that combination against Joey, that would have saved me, man.
Oh man,
I'm
Def
really mixed about that game, if you can't tell.
that's totally fair. Of course, energy wave. The block lineup, a lot of energy blocks, though I suppose blue guard's mostly just there to be pitched mastery anyway. So why even count it as an energy block?
Yeah, I mean, I did use it a lot as an energy block. I mean, it definitely does serve that purpose. Like against Namekian and Gohan, you need to kind of hang on to it until like you see, okay, he doesn't have Namekian Confident Burst or something like that. And then once you've gotten an idea enough of his hand, or he's played all his cards, and you're like, okay, now I can pitch.
Now I can pitch it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about, like overextending. It's really easy to just like see like, oh my god, I've got energy guard and 3 energy attacks, or blue guard and 3 energy attacks, and just like
Let's
energy
let's
guard.
fucking go.
Yeah,
Drop the guard of the mastery right away, and just be like,
yeah.
yeah, be
And then
greedy.
your opponent plays like the worst possible card that you can think of. You really have to like play combats very carefully, but the allies kind of help you do that too, because they've got actions, so you can bait your opponent's hand out with your allies and hang on to your cards in hand.
Yeah.
So then you know for sure, like, okay, now I should mastery discard because he probably doesn't have this now. As you're like knocking out these potential hazards of your opponent's hand, you can then play against what you think your opponent does have. It's a very cool deck like that. If you start to think about playing Resolute in that way, instead of just like, I'm going to enter with 10 attacks and try to kill them in one
Yeah.
turn,
Yeah.
that if you're more thinking about it like, I'm going to try to make this combat, like, I feel like I'm really not explaining this well.
You're
But
trying to feel out a combat. You're like, all right, let's do all this stuff that you know I have, and let's just keep you in the dark about what I really have in my hand.
yeah, yeah. And blue is the retaliation style. I think that's how you're supposed to play it. You're supposed to kind of hang on to your cards as long as you can and see and feel out what your opponent has. And then once you've eliminated those threats, then you start
Mm.
really doing the omae wa mo shindaru.
Yeah, getting just coming in with the big boy damage. Of course, you got 2 energy resistance. I mean, you are an alien trait, so you get the full value out of this. And then 3 narrow escape. I think most Resolute decks are gonna be rocking narrow escape unless they're really high on the physical attack count, because
Yeah.
narrow is just the top decking is very good. 2 leverage, 2 deterrence, time, and 3 reflexes. So a lot of blocks. Only the 4 physical blocks. Is that just mostly because of the allies? I'm assuming. Plus you got the 4 omnis.
Yeah, the allies are really good. You've got Goldo, Zarbon. In worst case, you can really punish your opponent for throwing physical attacks. I mean, it's just you do get a lot of stages in this deck. I mean, if you get to level 2, every time you use that power, you're getting 5 more stages, which is kind of cool. I never really paid much attention to Ginyu before this set, and when I read that, I was like, holy shit, this dude gets 5 more stages when he uses that power.
Yeah.
I always thought it was 3, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, the physical is probably one of your best matchups, so you can kind of skimp on the blocks. And I mean, Ginyu's reflexes, if you see one of those in a physical matchup, you're probably gonna win. To be honest, that card is just absolute bonkers crazy.
Yeah, oh man, I hate attacking into Ginyu blind without like a stare down or a sphere because of reflexes.
Yeah, I can see why Red Ginyu, like Shane and Kevin have both played this deck. Like the attacks are all, or the blocks are all just so. You got blocking hand, Ginyu's reflexes, red brace, like all these blocks. You just please don't have it. Please just don't have it. Those are all blocks that you just pray to God your opponent does not have. And yeah, so this deck is kind of similar. Top deck hella attacks with narrow escape and then discard blue guard to draw them, that kind of nonsense. You got reflexes. The blocks are all really good.
Yeah.
My version before this tournament that I ran in the online tournament did not run as many blocks. And I can pretty much safely say that that is why I lost that tournament. Um, but I think this block lineup is just really strong. You have so much defense. So even if you don't have just like absolute gas attacks in your hand, like your opponent probably can't hit you. You've got Goldo, you've got Mastery Prevention, you've got all these blocks. Like it's really hard for your opponent to do like sizable damage to you.
And 63 endurance as well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
No, it's. I mean, I look at this list and I'm like, yeah, this looks really good. I don't think there's any card that's like really missing. I mean, you run Nappa, so like, why would you run Stylish Pose? And that's like it. You
yeah,
know, maybe Super
yeah,
Shenron argument for like board wipe, but like at the same time, Ginyu is just really good at keeping the allies and grabbing them. So I don't know.
yeah. I could see Zarbon getting cut for Super Shenron. That's a change I've thought about since uh since the tournament, just because getting allies from your life deck is typically harder than your banish zone. So like if you can protect your Ginyu allies from being banished specifically, that'd be really good. Plus the rejuvenate, like you can rejuvenate a card like blue leverage off the bottom and oh wow, here's an energy wave. Like that kind of stuff is really cool with Super Shenron.
Mm,
Um,
that's true.
yeah. I'm surprised you didn't bring up decap. I think in my other Resolute
Uh,
you were pretty high on decap. So I'm curious if your opinion has
so
changed.
in this build, you just run so many energies and blocks that like decap, like you could run it, but like where's the space? Everything else has higher value, and like the only things that I see as valid decap targets are gonna be those two, right? Betrayal, head knock.
Well, you've got a rest too.
Well, but like realistically, right? Like I mean, arrest is fine and all, but like you have level 2 to go grab them. You have arrest already in there. Like you don't, it would be too much ally grab almost, and you have reflexes. Like the biggest thing I'm thinking is like decap does no damage, and you don't need to put yourself to 0 with its power. So you really just like I like you mentioned the anger hate being a lot of on hit, so that's why like decap would only really be necessary for head knock, and then betrayal obviously is good, but like you're going to try to just match them with board actions if they're a board deck.
Mm-hmm.
And you have
Yep.
Nappa already kills setups, so like it's drills at this point. You know what I mean? Like that's how I see it though. So that's why I didn't bring it up. But like it just doesn't have enough value in this deck. If you were running like Blue Slash and you weren't as hard on the energies, maybe then it would be like okay, maybe decap would come in over. But what would you put it over? Like everything here has great synergy. Like energy push just has energy push is like arguably my thought process from an outsider, like the weakest energy of the three, but the utility on it, like you said, being able to just between like stare downs and spheres and that, there's essentially 8 anti-time as a warrior's tool cards right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's like as far as aggro goes, like it does exactly what you want it to.
Yeah. I another change I've thought about making since the tournament is maybe cutting the 2 spheres for 2 digs. That would give me the so before I was running Unleashed with like blue tandems and things like that to try to unleash the Unleashed decks down or like change Goku's levels.
Mm.
Um, so like you could run 2 dig or something like that to try to hit the board decks, the heavy drill decks, because like I obviously have the heavy
It's
setup
and at
and
worst, I
that.
mean it makes all of your ally attacks unpreventable.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, yeah, and there are plenty of attack like your level 2. Uh, a lot of your attacks are preventable normally, other than energy wave, static blast, and blue clash. Everything else can be prevented, so it would affect everything else. Um, I wanted that safety, like just the 2 spheres it kind of plays into the defensive nature of the deck as well as the offensive nature. So, but if you're playing in a heavy board meta, I could definitely see two digs going in here somewhere. I just don't ask me where they would go.
Yeah, I think the two sphere is better in my opinion. Like you already have Static Blast, and you're already throwing big enough damage. Like you know what I mean. Like you could definitely still kill board decks with how it is, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But no, it's
you
oh
you really
good.
only need like one good combat where you hit them with like two or three attacks, and that's like all this deck really needs. And then like your defense and your hand advantage, your overall just action advantage with the allies, like you can kind of, as long as you can get that advantage, 10, 20 life cards, whatever it is, you can shore up after that and just hold that advantage over your opponent.
Yeah.
And your allies' actions and the attacks you do have, if they're trying to come back from that, they're probably holding more attacks to try to come back. So at that point, you can hold more blocks, or just you lay down another static
Or
blast.
you gas pedal if you get the gas pedal hand. So
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah. No,
it's
it's
a
a
fun deck to pilot. It's really fun.
yeah, no, I've seen some really interesting Ginyu Beats builds, and I just think the ally package just does so much on its own to supplement. And blue lacking a lot of the modifiers, it brings them up to pace as far as damage counts in the game goes these days. So uh, I think it's really good. I mean, blue Ginyu can't be bad, right? But Resolute, specifically, you get to like really just take advantage of the Resolute package pretty well.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's probably the best right now. I was happy to see at the most recent tournament two Resolute decks top cut. That was like hell yeah. Just as the what's the word I'm looking for? Resident Resolute player.
Mm,
Seeing Johnson also top cut and do really well. I was like, let's go. I mean, the last build beauties I did was Resolute Boo,
boo.
and he
So
up with that deck.
yeah, yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Resolute's definitely undervalued right now a little bit, but it's definitely pairing it up with these MPs that bring the advantage to it, action advantage wise. Like you need to be able to bring up extra actions to take advantage of the modifier, I think is the biggest thing. And then, like you said, the stage pressure can really hurt you, but Ginyu mitigates that. Boo can mitigate that with allies. So definitely
Yep.
interesting. Really cool list though. Congratulations on the run, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Hopefully, I'll see you in TOP.
Hopefully, I'd love to see you again. But yeah, I think we'll be wrapping this episode up here. As always, Anthony, it's a pleasure to have you on. I always love talking about. It feels like every time we've talked, it's been about blue, but I'm totally fine with that.
That's that's what I like to do. That's why I never try to spike tournaments. I'm best at playing this kind of deck.
Yeah,
You know, if I try to spike, that's when I lose. So I'd rather just play this what I'm comfortable with, what I'm best at playing, and I really do get the best chance.
fair enough. Well, guys, as always, there's always more builds in the Build Beauties playlist. I'm always looking to get people on here. I'll keep trying to take people who've been top cutting this season and have them break down their deck lists for us all on this. Look forward to more of those. But yeah, thank you again, Anthony. And guys, as always, take it easy. Peace.